For you, who posed greater problems? Was it Canelo Alvarez or was it Triple G?
The most difficult task for me out of the two was probably Golovkin. I felt like it was more dangerous. He posed as more of a threat.
There's a lot of people in the media, but also the fans that don't believe Canelo Alvarez is a true carrier of that Mexican style.
When he put fighters through all the things that he put them through, whether it's fighting at an older age, whether it's weight restrictions, we all know there's several things, but it's what we consider the Canelo effect. I feel like if he didn't put those fighters through those things, he would get all the credit, especially from us fighters. As a true fighter, we know that you can't really judge a certain outcome over a former world champion who is totally past his prime versus fighting a Miguel Cotto in his prime.
Hércules Gómez, charlas de cuarentena hoy con uno de los hombres importantes en el mundo del boxeo. Pocos peleadores realmente se enfrentaron a los populares de la última época del boxeo mexicano, Chavez Jr. y Canelo Álvarez. Él es Daniel Jacobs, que está con nosotros en Ahora, Nunca. Daniel, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, how are you doing? What's been the toughest part for you being a pro boxer during this quarantine?
I'll tell you some pros and cons. I think the con has truly been just being out of my natural environment, my natural element, which is a boxing gym, being around fighters, being around my team and my trainer. So I just think my natural element I'm just missing and lacking out on. But ultimately, I feel like I've been able to learn so much and being able to, physically and mentally, internally grow as a person with all this stillness going on. I've been able to be a better person in my, within my own right. So, I mean, I'm just trying to make the best of it like everybody else.
Danny, I'm sure now that you have a lot of time on your hands, you've been able to reflect on what it's been the last 30, 40 days, and even your last fights. You're coming off of fights against Julio Chavez Jr., where he comes in a little overweight, but you have a very good tactical plan and you took it to him. I want to know really quickly, was it what you expected? And number two, did he give up? Did he say no mas?
First question, I guess, was he too much? I don't think it was necessarily a too much. It was more so about really adjusting and get acclimated to the weight. Obviously, Chavez is a former world champion. He's a skilled fighter. He has a couple limitations and obviously some issues outside the ring that we all know about. But most importantly, I was just looking forward to getting in there with the son of a legend, former world champion, and just someone that the fans was there to support. So, yeah.
I think you had this unique experience of facing Mexico's two biggest names lately, that's been Canelo Alvarez, and much was also expected from Chavez Jr. during his career, although he never really delivered at the level of which Canelo has actually done. If you could point to us to the main differences you saw in both, what's the main difference between Canelo Alvarez and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? You fought both, you know them very well.
I think the difference obviously was skill, obviously physique. Chavez is a much more bigger guy, and we didn't have any weight restrictions on our fight, as if we both were put under that when we fought Canelo Alvarez. So it was a bit different. I knew facing Chavez, I was going to be facing the very best that we've seen, hopefully, right? And then first couple rounds, that's what it looked like. It looked like Chavez was really, really into the fight. I mean, we don't know if he blew his load in a sense, but Chavez really was able to show that he has some skill left. And for me, I think for however long it lasted, I was just able to hope that he gave his best so that the fans wasn't disappointed. At least that's what we tried. So.
Were you surprised, Danny? I mean, he says you struck him with the forearm and it was his nose that was broken and he could no longer continue. Was it a case of an accidental blow to the nose, or do you think he just gave up?
Honestly, truly, I think Seriously, I think he gave up. I think it wasn't one of those situations where you can say, okay, here was some guy who's clearly trying to cheat and initiate headbutts. You can clearly see I was really trying to be professional, trying to give the fans a good fight, looking for no excuses. If anything, I wanted to fight the style of fighting that he wanted, because this is what the fans wanted, right? Toe-to-toe, mano-a-mano, the Mexican style. That's kind of the style that I was prepping for. So when he kind of blew his load and he didn't really give it his all, he gassed out, I knew it was a matter of time. And then at that time, too, I was actually getting acclimated 100%. So it just was perfect timing. But he wasn't able to handle it. And, history's the rest is history.
I think it's very interesting when you speak of the Mexican style, because there's a lot of people in the media, but also the fans, that don't believe Canelo Alvarez is a true carrier of that Mexican style. What kind of style would you say Canelo Alvarez is defined by?
It's really hard to say without really seeming like one has the blues. I mean, because if you think about, all the fighters, all the top fighters, all the legendary names that Canelo fought, and you think about all the conditions that they fought him under, you really have to really bring that into reality. And you judge it by that. And that's how I judge Canelo. I mean, he's a great fighter. Take nothing away. But I just think that, when he put fighters through all the things that he put them through, whether it's fighting at an older age, whether it's weight restrictions, we all know there's several things, but it's what we consider the Canelo effect. I feel like if he didn't put those fighters through those things, he would get all the credit, especially from us fighters. I mean, regardless to what the media say, I feel like from us fighters, he would get the respect that he's looking for.
You're obviously a different fighter now at this weight division in super welter. Do you think, if you fought against some great fighters, you're one of the few fighters that's fought against Canelo in his prime, Triple G, great matchup that you guys had. When you think about the possibility of fighting him at a different weight class, do you think it could have gone differently for you?
Oh, 100%, 100%. So it was times where I watched the fight and I seen so many things that whether I could have countered, I could have slipped, I could have been a little bit more offensive. But in that very moment, I knew at that time that I was so weak. So it's just like me watching the replay of things that I wanted to accomplish that I physically couldn't accomplish. And then it had nothing to do with my opposition, more so with the position that I was under, the circumstance that I was faced with. So at 100%, with no weight restrictions, with with the right team, I feel like
at super middle, you would have handled that for sure, right?
100%, 100%. I mean, it was a close fight with all the weight restrictions, regardless. I mean, had I won one more round, the whole fight would have been a completely different outcome on the judges' scorecard. So we have to take that in consideration too. So it's not me trying to be bitter. It's more so letting you guys know what's really real.
Yeah, it's just laying out the facts. What's coming up for you? Because at this point, no one really knows when are we going to be able to go back to normal, or when are you as fighters are going to be able to go back to a proper training and then have the possibility to fight, whether it's without people or if the chance presents itself with people in the stands. What's coming up for you? Because I know there are two names, super middleweight, that you're really trying to make those fights happen. But if you had the choice, who would you fight next?
If I had the choice, I think I'll fight Gabe Rosado. I think with this being my last fight, contractual-wise with DAZN, I think it makes perfect sense still being able to get acclimated to the super middleweight division. He's a tough cookie. I mean, he's probably not the best in the division, but he'll definitely be able to give me a stern test as far as giving the fans a great show and me getting out that personal debt that I have with him. Obviously, we know throughout the years we had a couple words back and forth. So for me, I think that makes sense. And then for me, it's easy pick'ems after that. I'm looking forward to fighting the best of the best. And the two names, obviously, that we know about that makes the most sense is Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders.
Why go for Gabe Rosado at this point instead of straight to Callum Smith or Billy Joe? I mean, is it because the way he's running his mouth, has he struck a nerve with you?
Because I don't like him. Yes, because he's got under my skin, man. I mean, the only fighter, in my opinion, that truly got under my skin was Sergio Mora. And we've been friends since then. We've talked, we've had a conversation. And he let me know that it was one of those situations where, you know, it was just doing it just because it's one of those things that boxers and the culture, how it works. So with this particular situation, I think it's a little bit more serious because this guy is taking personal jabs. So, yeah, let me go ahead and get this out this way. My last fight with the Zone, we can go ahead, we can make a new contract if they want to resign me or, you know, however it works. But the fact that I have options, the fact that, you know, if we want to go across the pond to PBC and fight some of those guys, we have that option. Of course, we know I work closely with Al Heyman. So, I mean, the fact that I have options for me and the fact that the super middleweight have some really, really stern tests, I think it's just really a matter of time, honestly.
Yeah, it is stacked. Speaking of Billy Joe Saunders, it seemed like a pretty much done deal that he was going to fight Canelo 1st May. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen. And everything's pointing to September 15, or at least the Mexican Independence Day in Vegas. If that actually happens, if that fight actually happens, how do you see the result? What kind of style clash would it be between Billy Joe and Canelo Alvarez?
Well, I think at that point, especially with after all this going on, I feel like it's a matter of discipline, and I think that Canelo has a lot more discipline than Billy Joe Saunders. Obviously, over the years, he's had good performances and he had lackluster performances.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of what BJ Saunders shows up, and I think with all this going on, the fact that we really don't know when we're going to be back, it serves for a lot of discipline, which I don't know if he has. So come back and everything's all good. We're able to fight again. We will really be able to see the who's who as far as being disciplined and true to the sport.
You've fought against great fighters. You've mentioned already Canelo and Triple G. You've been in the ring with both of those. For you, who posed greater problems? Was it Canelo Alvarez or was it Triple G? Who was a more difficult opponent for you?
I would say the most difficult task for me out of the two was probably Golovkin. And I say that because I felt like there was more dangers. He posed as more of a threat. Even though Canelo, he had, he fought in spurts, and he always did. I've always said that Canelo is not one guy who, you have to worry about being down your back. You have to worry about all over you. Canelo wins rounds, sometimes steals rounds, and it's all good. But at the end of the day, I knew that it wasn't going to be that much of a challenge. But Golovkin, on the other hand, I mean, you got to think about him going into the fight with, just all the promo that he had with being the most feared fighter and the power, the knockout ratio that he had. Yeah. So it's just stylistically, I mean, that pressure. So for me, I think style-wise, I think Golovkin sort of like
Danny, I wanted to ask you, that Golovkin fight, I believe it was in the 4th round. Was it a knockout or did you get caught with the slip? What happened there? Because you talk about that pressure, and I look at that punch, and I'm not convinced it was so much a knockout.
I mean, I think any boxing fan or any true fight fan that knows boxing knows that you have to judge that simply how it is. And yeah, I definitely wasn't hurt, but was it a shot that contacted me to make me go down with the force? Yeah, I mean, we get it. We totally get it. It wasn't a knockdown shot. It wasn't something that hurt me. But when the referee see a contact, when he see, a right hand touch the body and go down automatically, it's something that he has to call. So I understand that. But
right.
Was it a knockdown? No. And we know that because I've got up after the knockdown and moved forward towards Golovkin and been able to push him back and go toe-to-toe with him after that. So, that serves my case.
And whenever Golovkin has a clear shot, it's hard to move after absorbing one of those hands by Gennady Golovkin. I was a little surprised when our production team shared with us your list of the top 5 pound-for-pound boxers in the world. Now I'm not surprised that you don't have Canelo in it because everything that you've explained so far. But if you could go a little deeper into what makes a fighter actually part of that list and why Canelo is not a part of your list.
Well, for me, I think about skill set. I think about just what all they bring to the table, their outings, who they've fought. I think about all those things, and I think about the conditions in which they fought those fighters as well. So I think as a true fighter, we know that you can't really judge a certain outcome over a former world champion who is totally past his prime versus fighting a Miguel Cotto in his prime or something like that. You know, it's just, we don't really have the same effect as it does with the fans. So I'm not really impressed. I just think that he's a great fighter, future Hall of Famer, nothing but respect to him, tremendous skill. But as far as like top 5, I don't think it's part of my favorite, even though he is of the top in the world.
I could see why you don't have Canelo there. I am struck by Lomachenko and also what is Tyson Fury. You have Anthony Joshua over Tyson Fury. I'm just curious about your overall impressions of that heavyweight division right now.
I guess I was probably being a little bit biased too with that list because all these guys that I'm choosing are guys that I truly like to see and I enjoy watching. So I'm more of an old school style fighter too. I like to study older guys, but obviously these guys being my peers, I tend to watch them as well. So, but for me, the guys that I mentioned, which are just 5, which I have so much more, I just think, man, those are the type guys that I can think off the top of my head that I enjoy watching. But as far as to put them at the top of the top of the top, that's so much to debate. Like, we can never say who's like number 1, you know? It's sort of a matter of preference.
What about that heavyweight division right now? Because it's so important to boxing and it feels like it's back. What are your overall impressions of that?
I love it. I mean, cheers to the big boys. I mean, I think rightfully so that they are the king of the division in a sense, or the king of the sport, because, you know, they are part of the biggest dangers. You know, think about a Deontay Wilder and being an opponent of his, or a versatile guy like Tyson Fury. I mean, power and speed and skill. So it's just so much you got to think about. And I'm just happy that the heavyweight division is back because for me, this is the division that I grew up on. So, yeah.
And we even had huge surprises like Andy Ruiz last year. Unfortunately, when you spoke about discipline, the first name that came to mind was Andy Ruiz. Had he been a little more disciplined, maybe the story would have been completely different. I wanted to ask you about this. I want to get your thoughts on UFC was deemed essential business in Florida. And it seems like boxing wants to take a bite of that, a part of that. And I don't know if really going to business with WWE, UFC, all those entities. As a professional, as a professional boxer, are you of the idea of let's try to make fights happen as soon as we can, or rather let's be patient and see how things evolve in the future?
Well, I guess, man, it's like bittersweet. It's you know, I think about the perspective for the fans and wanting to see fights and, you know, be a part of that, but I also think of our communities. I think about the boxing community. I think about the world. I think about the safety of everyone. And I don't know what I think is more, you know, productive, staying inside and everyone waiting this thing out till we know for sure this thing isn't going to spread anymore, or do we chance it? You know, and I'm in Atlanta too, and we're like one of the first cities that they allowed to be back open to, you know, be back to like civil, you know? So for me, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. It's kind of too soon. I don't want to be the guinea pig in a sense. So I feel as far as boxing is concerned, me personally, I would wait versus, you know, going back into it, because even the safety of the fighters, we have to train and we have to put ourselves in those different environments. I think for fighters, all of us want to get back to the sport. Like, you know, we're all like, you know, drug addicts. Like, we want to get back to it real fast. You know, it's a habit. which is understandable. We love this sport, but we have to think, you know, without our health and without the world being a safe place, then it's better to be safe, you know, than dead and not being able to experience all this at all. So, you know, we just have to follow precautions, man, because really this thing is really killing people by the numbers, especially in all these major cities. Shout out to all my peoples in New York. Shout out to everyone throughout the world going through this whole pandemic, man. Let us all stay safe. Let us all just follow guidelines and just, you know, ride this thing out as best as we can.
Daniel, you're so well-spoken and cerebral. I think this would be a good question to ask you. You have a young son. Do you want him to follow in your footsteps in boxing? Would you let him box?
No. I would not let my son box. You know, boxing is, and I have a picture here that I just picked up. A friend of mine got it the other day. And it just goes to show that boxing is just, it's a love that we always have, but it's a bittersweet. It has, like, you know, the Band-Aid on it, right? Right. So it's this love attachment that you grow for it, but at the same time, you know it's not good for you. Boxing is such a dangerous sport in and out the ring. You know, if you're not tied to the who's who of boxing, then you're gonna have a tough time. And then, even if you're the most skilled fighter, if you don't, you know, if you're not properly catered to, you're not going to have the best outcome as well. So I just want my son to use his brain. I want him to be able to be true to who and what he wants to do. But I don't think boxing will be that. I think, you know, he'll probably be like an astronaut or something like that.
There you go.
Well, he clearly has a great role model at home. It's always great to talk boxing with you. It's always great to talk life with you, Daniel Jacobs. We really appreciate it. We wish you the best. And again, whenever things go back to what we were used to, we look forward to seeing you once again on the ring doing what you do. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. You guys stay safe. To all my boxing peers, all my boxing community, we are going to get through this. We are going to survive, and we're going to get back to motion. Let's just follow guidelines so everything can go back to normal as fast as we can. So peace and love to all my peoples out there, y'all. Y'all stay safe.
Absolutely. Gracias, campeón. Gracias, champ.
Thanks, champ.
Thank you very much.